Hello and welcome to Simply Tax. Last August, guests Jerica Newby and Michael Nuttall joined us in episode 106 of the podcast to share their advice and tips on a big question that those in public accounting and tax in general all have had to tackle at some point, and that's, where should you work? I personally thought that Jerica and Michael offered some great insights from their perspective as campus recruiters on the accounting recruiting cycle, deciding between audit and tax, tips for being a successful intern, and much, much more. And we received some great feedback on that episode, which, by the way, we very much appreciate, and you can always provide to us by dropping us an email at simplytax@bkd.com and with a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. One listener shared with us that they took a lot away from the episode, but also thought it would be helpful to hear directly from someone who had gone through an internship experience to get their perspective, which I thought was a great idea. And that's why I'm excited to share with you on the podcast today a conversation I had with the 4 tax interns I had the pleasure of working with this summer in our tax department here in Chicago. We caught up right at the end of their internship experience at what marks the first in-person interview that we've shared on Simply Tax since the start of the pandemic, and it was one I really enjoyed. Of course, safety concerns were top of mind as we sat down to chat just before the statistics on the pandemic started to climb, with variants and cases on the rise. Let's go ahead and jump right in with this fantastic 4. And to kick things off, I'll let them introduce themselves and share their favorite musician or group at the moment.
Yes, my name's Sammy Grahowski. I'm a rising senior at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I would say my favorite artist has to be Kip Moore.
I'm Drew Neville. I'm also a rising senior at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And if I had to choose, my favorite musician at this current moment would be J. Cole.
My name is Batul Kapasi. I'm a rising senior at Loyola University Chicago, and my favorite artist is Glass Animals.
My name is Tori Chan, and I attend Loyola University as a rising senior, and my favorite musician at the moment is Bruce Springsteen.
So I have to ask you, we've got 2 schools and 2 of you from 2 schools each, right? Drew and Sammy, did you know each other prior to this?
We had a class together, but everything was virtual, so I didn't really get the chance to speak to Sammy prior to our internship experience.
Sammy, can you confirm this and maybe weigh in as to maybe whether or not you'd wanted to talk to Drew before this?
Drew is just a name that I had heard, but I'd never talked to him before, so...
Good experience and maybe of the internship, of even getting to know somebody from your school that you didn't previously know?
Yeah, I think that's definitely been cool to get to know Drew, which it's weird that we didn't know each other since Carthage is so small. I know most of the accounting majors. The fact that I didn't know Drew is weird, but we'll actually have a class together this fall, so that'll be nice that I know somebody going into it.
All right, now I'm going to ask you 2 the same question. Maybe Tori, you go first, and then Batul, you can fact check here.
Yeah, so we also had a class together, but it was virtual, and it was one that didn't meet synchronously. So it was an asynchronous one, so we really just did not see each other or speak with each other. But I've seen her name, but we just really have not had the interaction. And so I think it was cool to come here and be like, oh, we go to the same school. But I never noticed on the calls that she went to Loyola, so I never put the connection together.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, after our intern meeting with Matt before we started, I saw Tori's name, and then I saw her in the class, accounting 308, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to be interning together.
As a quick aside here, Matt Geyer is the fantastic and truly talented campus recruiter we work with here in Chicago. I have so many questions of this whole experience, right? Because I think the whole idea here was, let's talk about the internship experience, share your experiences, we could help others. But also you've had a little bit of a unique intern experience because of the whole global pandemic that we're contending with. So maybe we can lace a little that all in there too. But I'm going to go in reverse order this time. And Tori, maybe start with you about thought on the internship at the end here of it, and then whether or not it sort of met or was different from your expectations coming into it.
Yeah, so the one word, if I had to describe it like in one word, it would be enlightening. One of the things that I thought coming into this internship was that I was kind of just gonna file papers, like the typical what you hear about, or just not really get the hands-on experience of working in tax. And what was cool was that there's so many different returns that I didn't even know existed other than 1040s. It's things that I didn't even know gift tax existed, and being able to work on those, or being able to work with other associates that have not even encountered 709s. And so kind of learning side by side with them and being able to tackle the challenges that come along the way. And so I think that was pretty cool to not only have their guard come down, but allow for them to learn with me simultaneously.
You had this expectation of what like a tax internship would be. Was it like based off of what the stereotype of a tax accountant is?
I think I didn't initially really frame what a tax accountant would actually do. I think I thought, okay, I'm just going to be sitting here, I'll complete a return, and then that's it. I didn't realize that a reviewer goes in and reviews them and it comes back to you, and that then it goes like that. There's different stages it goes to. I kind of initially thought that, okay, once it's done, it just goes to the client and that's it. I didn't realize how it reaches the client before that, and the amount of pairs of eyes, which makes perfect sense because now going through them, I'm like, not that I'm not confident in the work that I did, but sometimes it's nice to have an extra pair of eyes look at it and be like, okay, is this the right number that I'm inserting here? Or especially from an intern perspective, everything you think you are putting in is wrong. Like you think sometimes every step, especially starting, is wrong, especially working in a system that you never or played around in. And so I think it's nice to it's cool to see the progression from when we first started in our first week to now, like just in Go systems or just navigating around anything. It's cool to see how we can easily print something quicker, or something that used to take us so long to do, we're able to do much more quickly.
Well, that's really cool. I can remember that experience from internship as well. You're like, wow, just to learn so much and you feel like you cover a lot of ground. So Drew, you were shaking your head about I had this image of the stereotypical accountant coming in. So maybe tell me what that is, and maybe if you've either confirmed that, what's like the green visor, like sitting in the back corner that I do, like if that's confirmed that for you, or if it's maybe evolved or changed as a result of your internship.
I think it changed a lot. Going in, I kind of had this idea of like, kind of socially awkward number cruncher type people that you like see in like movies, that it's kind of like the big stereotype. But like, this is really my first experience in corporate America. And even with a lot of the individuals in the office, varying levels of like transitioning back to the office, I feel like I got to meet a lot of different people and kind of saw how everyone's different and no one really fits that mold of what I thought a tax accountant would be, and the stereotypes that I heard and, like kind of fed into like coming in. I feel like there's a wide variety of people, and it's really cool to see like all these people come together and do tax accounting and have their own personal lives and be more than just, the stereotypes that you hear about. And I think that was kind of one thing that I really took away from this experience, is like all the different people that you meet and how like they would go about things differently, and just getting to work with them. Like, I feel like that was something that I really appreciated.
Tool, I'm going to ask you, because you have a different perspective, because this is actually not your first internship with us. So you kind of have you have experience, I guess we'll say, right? So how has this been different or helpful to have kind of that vantage point?
So going into my first internship, one thing that I never had was like any tax classes. I didn't have any experience working with a 1040, or even I didn't even know what any of that was. So the learning experience I had during that internship was very not basic. I did learn like a lot of stuff, but still trying to understand just what goes onto a tax return, what goes into the preparation, all of that. And this second time around, I had a lot more experience with classes and learning things in school, and was able to bring that in to this internship and actually build on that. And I actually felt like I understood what I was doing and where it, like the actual like law behind it and how it was fitting into the tax return. So that was really interesting to see like that transition throughout.
For sure. Because even thinking like, and this is probably more speaking to like when I did a master's in tax, and I was working and doing it at the same time. And I always found that being able to learn something and then apply it is helpful. But then sometimes just jumping in with no background is nice too. So kind of cool you had that experience. Now, Sammy, you also have a little bit of a different vantage point on like the stereotype of a tax accountant, right? Because you know one. Your dad's a tax accountant, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. With that in mind, that you had the viewpoint of like growing up with that, how has this experience stacked up with that, would you say, so far?
I'd say my experience has definitely been kind of different than my dad's. My dad has worked in private industry for many years, so it's been a long time since he's worked in public accounting. But I would say coming into the internship, I thought that, the stereotypical internship experience is the intern works on one specific kind of project and you kind of are just doing that the whole time. But what I have really appreciated is being able to work on a wide variety of returns and a wide variety of work. And I think what's made that more manageable is the fact that we kind of learned these new things in different segments, where early on we were doing a lot of partnerships, and then we got a lot of 1120 pro forma returns, and now we're doing estates and trusts. So it's been really interesting to learn about all the different things, but learning them in different segments has made it more manageable versus if we would have been fed like all this information and all these different types of returns at the beginning, I think that could have been really kind of overwhelming.
Was your experience too, or like Tori, you mentioned like, learned about gift tax and got to do a gift tax return and never even like had heard of that. Can you like relate, like, and just maybe not having never heard of it, but just really having your like mind open to the different types of tax and tax returns?
Yeah, I think before when I thought of tax returns, I thought of 1040s individuals, and then you think of, corporate returns, but you never really think about trusts. So that was something that, and then the different types of trusts within filing the trust returns. So that was something completely different that really I had no prior knowledge of. Okay.
You two are making my day with the trust and the gift and the estate and all that, I guess, got to say. So, for the record, I didn't set you up for this, right? Just to have this recorded so that when others tell me later that I put you up to it. No, I'm just kidding. Something that maybe got us going down this road of thinking, hey, we should have a conversation on the podcast was, wow, it would be kind of nice to be able to share some of our experiences or advice or tips to maybe help other people in deciding, should I do an internship? What should I do? What do I expect? How do I do a good job? That sort of thing. So Tori, maybe I want to start with you because I think it sort of came out of a comment that you made. What advice would you have maybe for yourself even going into this experience that you would go back and share?
I think one of the things that I was worried about, because I worry about the small little nitty gritty details of the things. And so one of the things I was worried about was coming in, I was like, holy cow, this is a transition from COVID. So there might not be many people in the office. And so then I was like, how are you going to network? How are you going to get to know people? Who are you going to sit with at lunch? That was something that I worried about. What if I can't get into the building? I had trouble even going up our elevators. So it was a bunch of worry that I had built up. But one thing I would tell myself is that it's not as difficult as you think to make the connections. They kind of come to you. It's not really forced where you feel like you have to come in and it's like you have to start really networking or something. It felt like we had the built up of all the conversations like at the interns, even with audit, where we were able to discuss with each other and get to know each other just a little bit, whether it was bringing our favorite ice cream flavor and explaining why, or getting to know each other in that sense. And so what I really liked was that, I guess the piece of advice I would give back to myself is ease off the pressure of yourself and allow yourself to go in with such an open mind that things might come to you, not really necessarily pre-plan, and try to have reasonable expectations, and knowing that getting to know the other interns has been amazing by being able to kind of use each other as a crutch and fill in the blanks where need be.
I'm happy to hear that. And that's great too, that like you said, kind of just being open to it, I guess. And also knowing that you're not going to know it all going in. I think that's really good advice. Batul, I don't know, what would you add or comment on, or what's your perspective?
Yeah, so to kind of add on to that, I would completely agree. Like going into an internship, don't put so much pressure on yourself to know everything or to feel like you have to, I guess, just take off the pressure and just kind of absorb things as they come to you. And then the biggest thing is just ask questions and keep asking questions if you don't get it. Don't just like let someone tell you something and be like, okay, yeah, I get it. Like if you don't get it, ask why, ask how. and ask them to like re-explain it in a way that you get it, because not everybody explains things the way that your brain would understand it. And if you never ask, then you're never going to know. So ask tons of questions, because everyone loves to teach and everyone loves to like help.
You know, you just said something that, because I will say, I oftentimes say that, like, ask me whatever, like, and then there's just that natural, you don't sometimes want to ask something that's going to make you admit you don't have any idea what you just asked about, right? But the fact that like some people explain things differently, like in a different style, and some people learn in a different style, that's huge. So yeah, sometimes you really legitimately need to ask the same question a different way or to a different person, because it didn't make sense. It didn't click. So that was good. I appreciate, like, that's something I'm going to keep in mind for the future as well.
Someone actually told me that the best way that they learn is by teaching it to someone else. So they appreciate when you ask questions, because they're kind of reinforcing that knowledge within themselves as well. I
will tell you, I am one of those. That's maybe how I ended up doing a podcast, but that's like probably another whole conversation of itself. But Drew, going on back to you, what advice would you have for yourself or others that are embarking on an internship based off the experience you've had?
Well, one thing that we did early on that I felt was pretty helpful, just kind of going into the internship, was trying to decide what were some of the main things we were looking to take out of the internship. And I think kind of those things that I came up with that day have really like resonated with me and have been in the back of my mind like every day, so to speak, as in like, this is what I'm trying to do. And for me, that kind of looked like doing as much as I can with as many different people as I can. So like pulling different types of returns, working with new people, asking a new person every time I have a question, just so I could, get a really broad understanding of all these different concepts, but also kind of get a broad feel for the office and the different people in the office. Obviously, you're going to make deeper connections with certain people that you like grow comfortable with. That's just naturally what happens. But for me, I really wanted to make sure that I was reaching out, covering all my bases, and really just getting to know as many people as I could, because I knew I only had a short window of time. And I think that for me, that was kind of what I was looking to do. And I think just keeping that in the back of my mind really helped me succeed in that and continue to look to do that.
The whole stereotype of don't really want to get out and talk to people and whatnot. I mean, there's some element, like, I'm that way. Like, that's not my first nature to go out and meet everybody in a room, whatever. That's intimidating, especially coming in. But yeah, you kind of had to like get over that a little bit just because you had this short window of time. So I think all four of you have done a good job with that. So from my perspective, so for whatever that's worth, mission accomplished, I think.
Well,
so
I appreciate that, because that's something that I talked with like our coaches with. That's something that I don't necessarily feel comfortable with all the time. Like you said, I'm not the person who's going to walk in the room and, introduce myself to everybody and kind of like be the life of the party. That's not really me most of the time, but I definitely try to make a concerted effort to get out of my comfort zone a little bit. And I think that's really important in your internship, is to kind of push yourself past the point of comfort and start getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
All right. Well, now you know my question here, Sammy, and like what I'm going to ask you. Advice to yourself, advice to others on an internship.
I'd probably say two things. The first being, ask all the questions, but when you're asking the questions, asking why. There's a lot of times where you ask questions and you can kind of learn something just by, I know I clicked this button and then this button, but you don't understand why that number goes there. Where's it coming from? And when you understand that, that's what really helps you remember it, I think, for future returns, and helps you just more conceptually understand what you're doing, which I think is really important. And then if I could go back in time, go in with that mindset of being a little more even keel and understanding that as an intern, there's going to be days where you feel like you can't get anything right and you're really struggling and nothing's making sense and you're asking for help all the time. And like knowing that that's okay. And then there's also going to be days where you feel like you're invincible and it's like, I know this and everything's going smoothly. But just never getting too low on yourself and just being positive throughout it all.
That is very true, and not something I ever would have guessed. Like coming into like working in public accounting, that you're gonna have some ups and downs in there, but I think it also kind of makes it interesting, I guess. But you cannot get too hard on yourself sometimes. All right, I'm gonna just kind of throw this one out to whoever wants to take it, and if you all want to chime in around, we'll look at me personally. If there's something I could have done differently on the other side of, giving you this rewarding intern experience, what would it be, or what advice would you have for me on making sure it's the best for you? Any takers on that one?
One thing that I guess hasn't been a huge part of our internship that I wish kind of was a bigger thing. As an intern, I feel like we get a taste for, what life would be like as an associate. But and we work a lot with managers, senior managers, and like getting review comments and discussing projects with them. But we don't really see what it is that they're doing. And I think it would be interesting. I think you had mentioned that past interns have been able to like shadow partners for a day. I think that would be interesting to do that at like different levels, maybe sitting in on a couple meetings, or like when they're doing review comments for you, going through it with them and seeing what it is they're looking for and how they do that, just so that we understand what it's going to be like as an associate, but we understand like what the prospects are as like we grow in public accounting.
I like that suggestion. Yeah, because we did do that last summer. We were fully remote, and so we're like, all right, we got to do something here. And actually, but you make a good point, because you're also making like a career decision in a way. Not that anything's ever set in stone, right? Especially, I always tell anybody that's majoring in accounting, I'm like, hey, good job. Now, who cares what you figure out from there? Like, you've got a lot of options, and that's the best part in my mind. But yeah, you're making a career decision, and you kind of might want to know what it's like. I'm going to incorporate that one. We'll name it after you, maybe. Any other thoughts or things that could make it a better process?
I think personally, for me, it was coming into the internship, I didn't know tax or audit, consulting, whatever realm of accounting you want to take. I kind of went in with, okay, we're going to give a tax internship a shot, and we're going to see what direction we take, if I like it or if I don't like it. And I think one thing that was interesting that our coach was able to do was I was able to kind of get a perspective of the audit side a little bit, just to, I know this is a tax podcast, so not straying anyone away from.
But full disclosure, I mean, that's like, sometimes that's like the elephant in the room that nobody ever like talks about, or is it gorilla in the room, elephant in the room? I don't know, whatever.
No, but I like how you said that it's not set in stone. Yeah. And especially as an intern, it's one where you don't know, especially after this internship, what direction you're going to take. And I think it was one where being at the firm, being in office, it was nice to see, like, we passed by the audit side, and I can't help but be curious and be like, oh, what do they do? Or what's their day-to-day life like? Is this something that fits me better than this? Or is it because, like how Sammy was talking about, how sometimes you have a rough day as an intern where you feel so defeated that you just didn't understand anything that day. And sometimes you think, would it be easier on the other side? Sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side, but like you always have that curiosity. And so I asked if I could kind of get a glimpse into the audit side, which I was able to, and it was nice, but I think it would be a little bit more helpful if it was a little bit more accessible. I think if I didn't voice that I really wanted to see both sides, it might have not happened necessarily. Sure. And so I'm glad that it did happen, though, because it kind of helped clear things up. It helped ease the pressure off of me. It helped. Now when I go to that side, I see a lot of more familiar faces. I know some associates on the tech side are like, oh, I might not necessarily know them, but I've always wanted to get to know them. Or so I think it helps build the community in the sense.
For sure. Because that is something I enjoy. And I will tell you, I actually probably would have considered myself more of an auditor for the first 2 years of my career than a tax guy. And, so I'm clearly biased now as to which side I think is, well, good for me. And I always think that's the important part. It's what's good for you. So I can appreciate that, you literally, I had no idea what either really were going in. So you kind of have to make a choice, but you want to at least know what the other side's like. So that's good stuff. Any other thoughts or comments, or not that you have to have any? I always just like feedback and having conversations. So, Batul, anything that you would add or?
So this isn't necessarily something that I would say you should do differently. This is like something that's good that I really actually appreciate.
Okay, cool. All right.
People always make it seem like higher ups in the firm are so like busy and you shouldn't take too much time out of their day or be talking to a partner is always kind of like thing that made me nervous before. Coming to the firm and just being able to talk to people like you and Tom and other partners in the firm and just seeing how accessible they are and how willing they are to take time out of their days to help you and to teach you is really honestly like very It takes away the nerves. It makes you feel like, okay, I can see myself doing this. Like I can see myself working here and being with these people and learning from them and growing here.
And then leave it to the tax partner to say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's record it. Cause that won't be like nerve wracking at all. Like this will be great. Quick aside. I mean, I always say I had no like vision even 5 years ago that I would, we'd be sitting around like having a conversation for a podcast. That was not going back to that comment I made earlier, Drew, like, that's not me. Yeah. You probably didn't expect that you'd be like having a conversation on a podcast about taxes either, probably, right? Is it part of your internship? But now you can say that you did. So there you go. One of the big pieces of advice I always give is that like partners are people too. And everybody that's working, has more experience, they're just people too, and figuring it all out. And it doesn't mean it makes it any easier. And I get that, but that's the truth, Well, I'm going to flip the microphone around. Well, not literally, but figuratively. See if you had any questions you would ask of me, if I can help you. I mean, obviously we're kind of coming to the end of the internship here, but what questions do you have that I can maybe help you with?
I had a question just kind of with being a partner and having to deal with clients. That's something that really interested me as an intern, tax intern especially. We don't really get to deal with the clients on a personal basis, really. So I was kind of just wondering, like, how are relationships with clients fostered and developed? Like, how do you start the process of finding a potential client, courting the client, getting to the point where now that they're a client, you're upholding the relationship, and like, what does that really look like?
That's a really great question, and probably also another one that we can think about how we can incorporate in. So if we did that shadowing thing and the meeting thing, it would give you a better sense perhaps of it. But for me, because everybody takes a little bit of a different approach, the biggest thing is around responsiveness and just being, the term is almost cliche now, the trusted advisor. And I know we say that, that's part of our tagline, but like, that's really my goal. That's really what I want to do is working with let's say a business owner. Tax is not the first thing on their mind. And I get that and appreciate that. But when it is, it's very important to them, and you don't want it to become an issue for them. So being able to help, navigate some of those decisions, because at the end of the day, how much they take home, tax is a big part of that. So being able to just help and be a resource, and also being comfortable to know that I might not know all the answers, which is sometimes hard to, to deal with, right? Because you just want to help, right? But that's part of the reason why I enjoy working with our firm and our group and say, I don't know the answer, but I can find somebody who does. And yeah, it's really just around helping. That's how I look at the whole thing. Even the process of finding new clients, I just look at it as helping. And I've probably over the years become more comfortable, and sometimes I'm not going to be the right fit. Maybe somebody else is going to be a better fit, because I think personality is a big part of it, and how you're going to work together, and getting more comfortable with that, and just trying to find, hey, I think it's beneficial on both sides. We're both going to get a lot out of this. And that's kind of how I approach it. It's an evolutionary thing. It's always changing, kind of like choice of who your favorite artist is. That's going to change maybe, over time, but it's not set in stone, again, to use that phrase, and that it evolves. But at the end of the day, I look at, and why I love what I do is just helping people.
I have a question just from like a partner's point of view. What do you think makes like interns successful? And then what tips would you have for an intern that then is transferring into like an associate role?
The way I look at it is the eagerness and the overall skill set to learn, especially anymore, because I'll tell you, like in my career, I've seen how many tax law changes and technology changes, and you name it, like everything's changed, right? Even like, again, mention like the pandemic, like how we go about just everything we do changed. I look at it as somebody that has that skill set of being able to learn. He was a guest on the podcast, and he was our previous chief operating officer, and was the chair of the AICPA for a while. His name's Eric Hansen, and his mantra is always the skill set of being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And so I think that and like having that learning mindset is what I'm always looking for. If somebody that has learning mindset is not afraid to ask the questions, Betul, like you were mentioning, like, and maybe asking it again if you didn't understand, and doing it in a good way. That's to me almost the most important thing. I know that you're starting out. I don't expect you to know everything about the Internal Revenue Code or whatever, right? that's still part of the point, because you're trying to get something out of this experience too, right? Trying to figure out, is this for me? Like trying to learn, like there's a lot that you need to decide from it. So I look at it as a two-way street. So I think that ultimately thinking you have to have all the tax stuff figured out, that's not a huge one for me, which probably sounds a little weird to say that, hey, it's a tax internship and you're going to go become a tax associate. Maybe I should know something about taxes. That'll come, I think, if you have the learning mindset. And I think, making that transition to the associate, it's just keeping in mind what you, that process you went through, like the takeaways from that, so that you can kind of get back up that curve again. Because admittedly, right, you'll go back into the classes in the fall and then, they come back out again. It's kind of like riding a bike. You'll remember it now that you've had the experience, but you have to dust it off a little bit. So I'd say, the extent that you can just kind of jump right back in at the level that you had with the internship and be able to just kind of hit the ground running, that will really help you out. Yeah, kind of just leverage what you learned. So just be open to learning, basically, at the end of the day.
I had a quick question. So, Damien, you have your master's in taxation, right?
Mm-hmm. I do.
And I don't know if you did that post-college, if you went immediately into that, but if you, go into that immediately.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So I did it after. I did it part-time while I was going to school, working rather. And I took it over 2.5 years while learning. It definitely created a crunch, to do both. And I had to kind of manage. But someone to give me the advice of kind of just keep going. Don't like, get out, take a year off and come back in. Mostly because it's kind of that, you already have the ability to work and go to school at the same time down. So don't stop, just keep going. But it also was part of my road to becoming a CPA and working in public accounting, was a little bit indirect in the fact that I majored in music and I don't have an undergraduate degree in accounting. I needed 2 classes basically from my MST to be able to be eligible to sit for the CPA exam at the time.
So is that what made you choose an MST over an MSA? Would you say it was because you needed those 2 classes, or how did you know? Because you went in as a music major and then you interned at another firm.
Yep.
But from an intern perspective, bringing yourself back into those shoes, did you know immediately tax was what you wanted to focus on? Because I'm assuming to choose an MST, you knew it wasn't going to be audit, it was going to be tax, instead of doing an MSA necessarily, where I guess you would have both sides. Did you kind of know that immediately going in to choose an MST over an MSA?
That's that's an interesting question that I don't know that I ever really paused to think about. I was drawn to tax and I was interested in tax. And what was interesting is, I was, the firm I worked with, I had an opportunity to do both audit and tax. We were a large local firm. I would say at that point, mostly did audit, but I also did do some tax. And I just knew I liked it. And that's kind of how I picked my major as well. And I think at some point I thought I was, I had aspirations to teach music. And over time I just thought, this accounting stuff makes sense. And I was sort of drawn to it. I'm a big believer, I guess, in finding the thing that has your interest, and tax did. And someone had told me, I'd actually gone to a career fair type night. It was like a meet the firms maybe. And I was talking to somebody, she was at one of the big 4. She was actually I think she was a biology major or maybe a bioengineering undergrad. She got done in 4 years rather than kind of switching majors, went over, did her master's in tax, and then was working at Big 4. And her advice was, follow your, if you're enjoying it, finish that up. Don't change horses if you think you're going to go over to accounting and tax, and just do it right after. So I think I just made a choice based off of what I thought I wanted to do, and figured that, well, even if I do auditing, this is going to help me. So that was kind of the driver. I don't know if that's the best advice to give people, is just say, just follow your passion. It'll be fine, No,
but sometimes you have to take that leap of faith.
It was a little bit. Honestly, it was a little bit of a leap of faith. I think I gathered from my internship experience enough that I do like this tax stuff, and at the very least I just like to know more, and so that was why I went that route.
So how do you go about keeping the team motivated and leading the team during periods of high stress, such as busy season? And
that's a tricky one, I will say, because it's the biggest thing that I have learned over the years that I kind of had to learn the hard way at times, is taking care of myself. It's like the whole face mask on the plane thing, put your mask on before or the air mask or whatever before others. Which, by the way, I was on a plane recently here for the first time since COVID, and that's actually part of the added reminders. I don't know if you've been on a plane, but it's first of all, yourself before others, but take your face mask off before you do that, and then help others. Like just all the steps involved here, right? You got to take the face mask off first. So, but anyway, like if I have to be in the right spot, right? Because I think it becomes very, very obvious when you work with somebody, especially when you're working longer hours with somebody, when they're kind of having a hard time, you can't push that down. And I've worked in environments with people that are the kind of leadership, and you look at them and you're like, man, you're like kind of falling apart and you're like hiding it. And I can just sense it. I can feel it. And I think it's trying to take care of myself, but then also owning that too and saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm not at my best today or whatever. And just saying that, I'm a person, right? Because I think first and foremost, it's not going to feel genuine and honest and feel like a good place to be if you don't feel like you're modeling that, to say that take care of yourself and then own it when you're not, because you're going to have ups and downs. Back to that, you're going to have good days, bad days, beat yourself up. Some days we just didn't get enough sleep, had to stay up and watch something. I don't know, whatever the reason is. We all have our ups and downs. So that's the foundation. And then from there, I think it's just, recognizing that, everybody's in a different spot, right? And likes to making it fun. I mean, and it can mean different things to different people. So providing a different varieties of just talking to people and maybe events to hang out or whatever, because long hours can be tough, but they can be a lot of fun too. And I've made a lot of really good friends over the years by working with them. And so I think you can make it kind of what you want it to be. You could say, man, it's miserable working all these hours and whatnot. And I also don't want to paint it as working these miserable long hours, because I don't look at it that way. But, I think you could look at it as like the glass half empty and, man, this kind of stinks and I don't really want to be here. Or you can just make the best of it and, look out. So that's how I approach it. That's really like 30,000 foot level stuff. I mean, I'm sure I could get into some real specifics, but I tend to think of it more of a mindset, and then everything else will just fall from there. Any other questions or things that you think would be helpful to share with other students or interns?
I think it's for sure get to know the other interns. I think one of the most rewarding experiences has been, I guess, like we celebrated Sammy's birthday last week. It's just doing your own things, whether it's a one-off of like you get to know each person, because I know with other firms, some people have seen it as like they're in competition with their other interns. And I necessarily never saw it as that. And I never felt like it was like that. I think here we are all very encouraging of each other. We know next week is all of our exit interviews at different times. And I think we all hope the same outcome for each other. And so being able to have that support behind you instead of trying to belittle the other person or feeling like you just never spoke to that person during the whole internship just because you felt like there was a power dynamic that was going to come out of it was something that was very helpful, because most of the time a lot of our issues could have been resolved by just asking each other instead of asking a tax associate. And I think what was nice was learning from someone who was at the same level as you. And so it was kind of, if I was struggling on something, I could go to any one of the other three and be like, hey, I think you encountered this issue before. And then they can explain it in a sense of knowing the knowledge of where I'm coming from because they've seen it all the way. Whereas sometimes when you ask as an associate, they don't know your comfortability with a program that you're using, or how maybe it sounds redundant for you, or where to pick up and start from. And so I think that that's really nice, is for sure fostering the relationships between the other interns and realizing that they're not necessarily your competition.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, at least in our department, in our firm, that's not how it is at all, right? I look at the internship as a great experience on both sides. Like we were saying here, right, Sammy, of like, figure out if this is the right thing for you, but it'll also figure out if we can find a fit on our side. So it's I think the more you approach it that way with an open mind, the better. But I have to say, that was pretty cool, your birthday thing. Like you guys had quite the impressive setup there. So that made my day.
I guess that's a pro tip to future interns, to not play down your birthday, because when you say that, the exact opposite will happen.
Yep. I kind of figured that was the case. I didn't have a chance to ask you that, but I'm like, you must have made a comment that you, or like tried to like bypass it. And they like, were like, all right. Cause I mean, literally like I walked in that morning and I think, yeah, the three of you were like, they were like, I don't know if you were like, oh wait, is this going to be him or not? Like maybe. So I kind of felt like there was like, oh, it's just you, Damien, never mind. Yeah, that's really cool that you kind of developed that camaraderie.
I thought that was big. And yeah, Sammy definitely downplayed it. And that was really the reason why we went all out for him, is just because wanted to make sure that he felt appreciated. But one thing that I would say is a word of advice is just like stay positive, approach everything every day the same way with a positive mindset. Like Sammy said, things go your way sometimes, other times things don't go your way. I had my fair share of frustration throughout the internship, but I'm better for it. And just like the mindset that I brought every day, I think helped me a lot, helped me get through that. And it also helped me like make like great connections with the other interns and the various other people in the office. I think that if I, let the negativity get to me, let the frustration bog me down, I wouldn't have been able to do that so easily. And I think that it's really important. And that's what I heard a lot coming in. That was something that I tried to do. And I think that really was a piece of advice that helped me a lot along the way.
I guess I'll piggyback off of that and say that a lot of times it was those projects that didn't go as smooth or were a little more frustrating. Those are the projects that are the most rewarding when you get done with them. So keeping that in mind and having that sense of accomplishment when you finish them. And I guess I'll also reiterate this, the asking questions. We've said it a lot of times. And I think coming into the internship, it was something that was said to me so many times where it's kind of like, you kind of roll your eyes. You're like, yeah, I'll ask the questions. But I think it really can't be overstated how important that is. And just asking different people questions too. We get assigned a buddy, and it's great that you have that contact, but also reaching out to other people too, because different people have different ways that they're going to tackle a project. So you can learn how to do the same thing kind of in different ways by going to different people, which was interesting.
Any closing thoughts, Batul, from your perspective, or something that you would reiterate or maybe add to the conversation at this point?
I would say definitely focus on building the relationships with others in the firm, go on coffee dates, get lunch with people, set up that time to get to know everyone, because everyone is so unique. They have their own perspectives, they have their own stories, their own pathway to how they got to where they are. And I've been able to learn so much about school, about the CPA exams, about balancing work and life, and just all of that from everyone that I've worked with. And it's been a really great experience.
I'm happy to hear that, because that's the whole thing in my mind is, I really enjoy what I do, but it's all part of kind of who I am. Like, I have things outside of the office too. So the reality is you're going to have sort of this like integration of your personal and professional life. And I think the more that it makes my day to hear you say that, because I think those are the things that you want to really pick up along the way with the internship of like, how am I actually going to do this thing later? And do I really want to do that? So, okay. Anything we haven't talked about that you think we should?
I think I would just add, don't be afraid to let someone know your learning ability. I know we touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the things is that I know I'm not an auditory learner. So if you tell me to if you just verbalize it to me, I will take notes of it, but it's hard for me to necessarily make the connection to what you're saying if you're just telling me. Whereas I know there was an associate here who was trying to explain something to me verbally, and he could tell I wasn't getting it. And he knew I wasn't getting it. So what he did was he took my notebook and he wrote what he was saying and wrote it out on my notebook. And I still have that in my notes, but it makes sense to me that way, where he saw it clicking, because I could point and I could be like, is this coming from here? Is this why it's going here? And it started making sense of where things were coming from. And so I wouldn't be afraid to tell people like, hey, I'm not an auditory learner. Is there a different approach that we can take towards this? Because it not only saves them time, but they really want you to truly grasp the concepts that you're getting. And you might not think that they know other ways to explain it, but you'd be surprised with the different ways people come up with things of how to teach it and present the information.
Well, this was a lot of fun. It really was. Thank you, all of you, for being open to the idea of, doing a podcast and sharing your experiences, and for being, I feel like you're being genuine and honest, because that's really what I was hoping for, right? Because I feel like that's what's helpful to other people. So just thank you to you all. And I really do mean, like, when I say, I wish you all the best of luck, and hopefully we see you all soon too. That's it for today, but let's keep the conversation going out on social media. You can find me on LinkedIn and out on Twitter at Damien Martin CPA. You'll also find me on Instagram at TaxDad and out on YouTube by subscribing to our Simply Tax YouTube channel. I'd also like to invite you to check out some additional resources and to get the contact info for our 4 great guests today in the show notes of this episode available at bkd.com/simplytax. I'm Damien Martin, and thank you for listening.
The information contained in this episode of Simply Tax is based on data available as of the date of its release. BKD is under no obligation to update this information if changes occur. Applying this information to your specific situation requires careful consideration of all facts and circumstances. Any information provided is not to be considered as tax, legal, or financial advice. Please consult your tax advisor before acting on any matters covered.